Welcome back, and this time we're going to be taking a look at a few new things with Flash. We're going to actually start off with saving our file and talking about the file type that we see there. We're going to get into a little bit of using layers within Flash. We're going to make some things move, our two items here, and we'll use some classic tweens there. And then last but not least, we'll be getting into how to publish and view your animation that you've been making. All right, so at this point, if you haven't already kind of explored or figured out how to save something in Flash, the most common way is probably to go up to the File menu item and then choose Save. And what you'll notice is that, like so many other programs, the default is untitled something, and we'll give this a name. I'm going to call this Kids on Campus. Just kind of it's a file I've been working on. And then another thing to note, and this is true again of many programs, that it defaults to a certain kind of file. In this case, it's this an FLA. The important thing to note there is this is the kind of file that is still editable. You can still make changes to it, and and if you're using Flash CS6, that makes perfect sense. So you'll notice that Flash CS5.5 and Flash CS5 also save as FLA files. What can happen is as a newer program comes out, it may have additional features that an older one, such as CS5.5 or CS5, didn't have. So what this would allow you to do then is to save your document so that the other versions, the older versions of Flash, might be able to open it as well. So for instance, if you're using CS6 at home, but in a school environment you have access to only CS5 or 5.5, then you could save it and then still continue to edit it while you're in your other school. We will do 5.5. So this is just going where I've told it to go. Alright, so we can see that the name of the file, Kids on Campus, is just as we had typed it in, and that we have our items that we had left off in the video 2 previously. So one thing that we're going to introduce pretty much straight away now is the idea that we have two different symbols on this same layer within Flash. So a layer is much like you can think of having things that are stacked up on top of a desk. So a piece of paper could be on top of the desk, and if another piece of paper were to be put on top of that, you would see it and not see the piece of paper below it. So these layers function in a similar fashion, and this works in, again, a lot of Adobe products. So what we're going to do is to keep from having some unintended animation, maybe where it grabs two things at once, we're going to take our two symbols here and put them into different layers. Okay, so there's a longer way to do it, but we're going to try the short way, which is while we have these both highlighted, to right click and then choose the option that says distribute to layers. Notice that as soon as we did that, it took the name of our two symbols, which was pretty useful. That's one of the reasons you want to have some good names when you're choosing a symbol name, so that later on when you're referring to it or you clicked on something that you're easily able to keep track of it. And here Flash was kind and it took those names and used those for the layers. So a couple things to know about layers then. This little icon indicates if we want to hide certain layers. Just means that it doesn't mean they're deleted, just means that they're no longer visible. So I can turn them all on and off, or I can just turn off one at a time and then turn off a different one, turn it back on, have complete control over that. And then here, right next to it, we have this little padlock symbol, and that indicates that we could lock, again, either all of the layers or unlock all of the layers by choosing the items up here, or locking one at a time. You'll probably find yourself inadvertently, at some point, changing something on a layer that you didn't intend to change. And that's a really handy example of when you would want to lock some of the other layers so that if you're really intending to work on changing this one, that you have the others locked and then they won't be changed by accident. Okay, so a little bit of background on layers there. So this one now, if you notice, really doesn't have any impact because that was our original layer, and we distributed both the swoosh and the kids text off to other layers. So right now, I can actually delete this one using the little trash can symbol. So make sure you have the right one chosen, and poof, he's gone. Okay, so now we just have our two layers. All right, and what we're going to dive into now is how is it that we go about making something move. All right, so for instance, let's say I want the kids word, the symbol, to move from this part of the screen to the other part of the screen. And if I just drag it down here right now, just by doing that, I'm simply changing where it is. I'm not animating it. So to really animate it, I might come along and say, I would like over time for this word, this symbol, to move. I'm going to go ahead and lock my other symbol. I'm even going to hide it so I don't see it and get confused. And then out here what I want is I want to have a keyframe. And we're going to take a look at the original way that Flash did some animation, and then later on we'll take a look at the more modern way. But what I want to do is create a keyframe. So I'm going to say insert keyframe, and the keyboard shortcut for that is F6. So I could either do that or right click and choose it that way. So what I want to do now, if you notice, I've got this one little circle here that's a keyframe, and this other circle here that's a keyframe. So nothing's changed at this point. But what I can do, really simply then, is I can say, well, I wanted it to travel from the top of the screen to the bottom of the screen. Okay, and so far I still don't have animation. It would just jump from one spot to the other. But this is now where some of the real power from Flash comes in. By right-clicking in this gray area in between the two keyframes, I can tell it I want to make a classic tween. So by choosing classic tween, Flash then does all of the in-between tween, all of the in-between frames for us. So there we have that one moving. Let's do, before we test this out, let's go ahead and animate the swoosh as well. So right here I have, this is my starting point at frame 1, and I think I'll probably have it last for the same amount of time, so I'll have it go out to frame 50, and I'll use the shortcut this time, F6, to create a keyframe. Alright, and again right now, since at this frame I have it sitting in this spot, and or 50 I have it sitting at the exact same spot, that's no animation. So this time though, I think what I might do is have it rotate a little bit instead. So let me go ahead and grab my symbol, and I'm going to take advantage of another tool really briefly, free transform, which will allow me to spin this around. Okay, and so really what the keyframe is kind of as if the director says action, and then you know that by the end of the scene you're supposed to be over here. So I'm going to right click in between the two and create a classic tween, and now I can do, this is called scrubbing, to see how that looks. And I'm actually done now with my first very simple animation. So I've got something moving, something spinning. One quick and easy way is to hit the enter key on the keyboard, and that lets it scrub through and show us this on the screen. If I want a little more finished version of my animation to be tested, I'll hold down the control key and press enter, and that actually publishes a temporary file of my animation. Okay, so you can see that indeed my two things are working. And our last point is just to point out the idea of we now have two separate files. This file that we're working to save is an FLA file, and when we publish it, it actually made what's called an SWF or a SWIFT file. Okay, so next time around we'll talk a little bit more about these layers and how we can have an impact on those things. But for now, we'll sign off.